bit of a rerun.
Well, maybe we should just replace me with an AI chatbot, and you've got enough material now for a learning model.
Hello and welcome to episode 187 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 14th of October. I hope you've had a great week and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I know Rockstar, but with this podcast, I share the marketing street knowledge I've picked up on my journey from sysadmin to CMO with the help of some true rockstars, my guests and chums, who I hope will inspire the marketing rockstar in you. Come say hello. You can find links to me and my guests at rockstarcmo.com or follow us on LinkedIn. This week in the marketing studio, Jeff Clark and I chat about content marketing technology and how it's still a challenge. And my chum and content marketing guru Robert Rose is back live with a fresh thought about borrowing ideas over a cocktail in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Rockstar CMO studio with Jeff Clark, our resident strategy advisor and former Forrester research director, as I pick his brains using this podcast as a thin veil to get some free consulting, which I hope you guys also find helpful.
Ian, welcome. Welcome back to the studio. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, mate. How are you?
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. We're enjoying a little bit of, we actually had a little bit of summer-like weather here recently, and it's now returning back to autumn.
Yeah, similar for us too, which is weird because we didn't have a hugely great summer. We had a heat wave, then it was raining, and now we've got some nice weather again, which is really odd for October for us, but there you go. Okay, so last week we covered a topic that was near and dear to my heart because I'm actually doing it in my day job, which was organising the team. And this week, now this one's near and dear to my heart because it's slightly what I've been doing for the last 2 decades. And I'm actually a little bit shocked that it's still a problem, right? Which is content management. So we're going to talk a little bit about content management. And it came about from a conversation you and I were having, and I was shocked that your clients, and particularly when you were at Forrester, were still asking the same questions that we'd had all that time ago. So the content management challenge. And in the notes, you've put, is it a rabbit hole or ostrich hole? So clearly. I don't know. Are ostrich holes bigger than rabbit holes? I don't know. But anyway, whichever way.
I would, I don't know, because the ostrich only has to fit its head in, whereas the rabbit's got to put the whole body in.
The whole warren, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right. And they might have little kids down there and all that. So,
I think anyway, so what say you, Jeff?
Well, and the reason I thought about ostrich hole is that, when working with clients and particularly doing technology assessments, the first thing we ask is what are your bigger challenges? You want to inventory what you got and see what's working and stuff like that. But what are we trying to measure this against? And so they would come back with, we don't have any control over our marketing assets. No one can find the latest version of, X file or whatever. Mm-hmm. We've got a new campaign or content strategy. We did a new brand. People still using the old stuff. How do we stop them from doing that? Or, creative service team is always late in delivering their projects. And so then I would say, well, do you have, digital asset management? Do you have content marketing? You know, anything around asset management? And they'd say, well, we use Teams, SharePoint, Google Drive, Box. I mean, just there's the long list of, you know, convenient places to put stuff. And which to me, the answer is no, I really don't have an asset management system. That's why I thought ostrich hole. It's like you've got this big problem, and you use something that is good for putting things places, but it's not really good for organizing, searching, tagging, making it really accessible. And so that's why I think it's a bit of that's why it's still a challenge.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with this as well. I mean, I was giving Orange Logic, who are a great digital asset management solution, some advisory up until recently. So I'm very aware that this is still something people are really talking about. So how do you then approach the challenge with them? You mean, what you say that they're already using Teams, SharePoint and Google Drive and stuff. So, I mean,
well, I think the thing is you gotta think about, and I did help, I've helped a couple of clients actually work on business cases. And so you got to dig into and we don't want to go down the rabbit hole, not ostrich hole of building the business case, but you got to like say, okay, so what's the challenge and what is the drag on productivity or customer engagement, whatever those are, so that you can start to measure. And typically you would find out you can actually develop an ROI. And one of I think the challenges is that, CMOs know they need a website, they need a marketing automation system. There's kind of like these basics, but then when it gets to asset management or content marketing systems, they're like, they tend to be kind of expensive. I'm not sure how it works. Do we really need that? Can we get by? And so, if you start thinking about challenges or, maybe you could think of these as use cases. I came up with 5 because that's your typical requirement. We can walk down through these and see, and certainly, given your experience with this,
well, I'm going to totally brand these as 5 effing challenges for content management. Absolutely. So, and I'm keen to hear what it is that your experience has given us for this. So, what's your first one?
First one is just internal accessibility. I can't find anything anymore. And it was interesting because I was talking to a friend of my son who is a animator, and he does video and all kinds of, cartoons and book animations. And it's like, well, what do you use? And he's like, well, I have my file server and I've got and it's like, so if one person sets up a filing system, they may be okay. Right, because they know their structure, they may know where they put things, as long as they still have short-term memory. But these days, the volume of assets that are required to support campaigns and content strategies, I mean, they just really bog down the ability for a creative team to find something and organize. What are the original files? What are the recent derivations? And so you need something that can support a kind of a cataloging system with a file taxonomy, searching across. And so even if the file taxonomy isn't working for you, how can I search? So everything's properly tagged so it can be found and searched. Do I have AI capabilities that actually look at materials and automatically tag them based on some criteria? And so I think that's where the other types of systems of storing information just fall short because they can't do those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's your first one about accessibility. And that's amazing because I think I've been hearing that problem forever, I can't find things. So ages ago, it was going to be, we were going to implement Google Search Appliance and all that kind of stuff. So it's that internal access. And I like your use case as well with the animator. So what's your second challenge that you think is the big one?
The second one is what I call the multi challenge. I should say that again, multi.
Yeah.
So like we ran a campaign in the US and we ran it in the UK. We need to run that in France.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden I've got, I need to create derivations that might have different imagery, obviously different language. The French don't want it in English. And this is something that business to consumer marketers have been this is why they had to solve this challenge a long time ago. Because if you got multiple brands with multiple types of imagery and you're selling across different regions with different copy and different languages and different, promotional calls to action, then, you've created that multi problem. And so, you need the ability to work with modular content. So how can I create something either from, an original or original I break down into pieces or pieces that I build up into something else? How can I take something that I'm publishing and publish it to multiple, omni-channel publishing? So I got to post. It's got to go to a social site. It's got to go to the website. It's got to be part of a trigger email. And then the obvious thing, given the case I brought up, is localization support.
Yeah.
So how do I support, that this particular, category of content has multiple sets of language content, or maybe can be interfaced. So if you have access through a portal so that an agency or regional marketer can pick up the original content and they do the localization. These are all things that are absolutely essential when you get into that multi world.
Yeah, geez. I mean, it is really amazing. Like I've been talking about, the multi challenge is like just burnt in my mind as the thing that we always need to talk about. And it doesn't. The thing is, that doesn't change. In fact, it gets worse, right? Because there is always a new channel, or there's always a new format that you need our content to be in. So that's always going to be the case, isn't it? So those are the two so far: being able to find stuff, internal accessibility, and then this publishing across the multis. What's your third challenge?
The third one, which I think also surfaced at least a decade ago. We were probably talking about this a decade ago, was just the improving customer experience. So, all of a sudden the website's delivering the wrong ebook or the wrong report, or, you're expecting a campaign to trigger certain responses and it's like sending the wrong message. And there was a recent Salesforce study that was quoted in an interview I saw with, one of your former people who have been on this podcast talking about this exact challenge, said 77% of B2B marketers report significant challenges in driving the right content consumption with external audiences. So they're just not able to make that right, connection. And so you want to be able to map content, not by just some of the types of metadata we were talking about before, but profile, customer profile, intent, maybe getting information about responses. Certainly a number of digital asset management systems can be interfaced with other systems that would provide information back to it, so it knows how it's being engaged with, and it can understand. It can start to evolve how it's going to be. If you go back to that publishing issue, how to publish it more effectively. And so this is one, I think, where, a lot of at least the top end providers have been doing a lot of work on this. And I don't think we want to get into the particular vendor names and stuff like that, but this is where the people that are leading the categories are doing a lot of work in this area.
So improving the customer experience and then reporting back exactly how that's working. And of course, the other thing about customer experience, which is often connected with content management, is personalization, right? So you can't do personalization unless you've got good content management in place, because you can't manage all the different variations that your audience needs, right? And
it's just a human. This is one of the things I just remember from when we were at SDL. Is just it's beyond the human being's ability to actually do the work to properly tag and set up all the content to do that kind of work. It's impossible.
Absolutely. So that's good. So that's your first three. So they're the standard ones I've heard so many times, like being able to find stuff, publishing on the multis, and then improving the customer experience, getting that feedback and doing personalization. So what's the fourth challenge?
Inefficient processes. It's like, so where's my job? It was due last week. What's going on? And this gets a lot into the sort of the workflow process, which again, depending on which asset management system you're looking at or content marketing platform, they may do a good job of this, or they may have another module that you can purchase that does workflow automation. But, you want to be able to speed the initial process by having, collaborative ideation. How can we take the concept behind a campaign and put it together quickly with input from stakeholders? How can we automate workflows so that we have standard processes that can be reconfigurable? And it's one thing, it's easy to set up a process. It's hard when you get the feedback that something's not working to like reconfigure it easily. You're trying to go from intake forms to assigning the job to who's going to review it to where does it get activated? How's it get archived? And then, another area which I know is people try to solve this is with other systems is the marketing calendar. So where can I go where I can see what's dropping where, when, and what state it is in actually developing it? And I think this set of capabilities, because I know sometimes we flip between content marketing platforms, digital asset management systems, but this is kind of an area where content marketing platforms help solve for this process or this problem, this challenge, and they typically have either a lightweight dam that's embedded in the platform, or they are partnered with another digital asset manager vendor to do the rest of the job.
Yeah, I was going to avoid going down that complete rabbit hole as well, because I've got a theory about, what makes, a content management system is basically an interface with a database that manages a bunch of assets and a workflow process and taxonomy and metadata that helps you manage those. And yet there are content management systems that lead in one direction, so therefore they're called MAMs, they're called MRMs, they're called DAMs, they're called content marketing platforms. And for me, content marketing platform was almost like a CMS with a calendar on it almost. So you really do need to understand your needs before you decide.
And this is unfortunately an area where I had innumerable conversations with, or have had numerous conversations with clients where they're like, well, we bought this. Because we thought it would solve that. And it's like, but it doesn't solve that, but it does this, or it's redundant with, we had Asana, and so it's kind of redundant with what we had before, and it doesn't do the other. And so it's this is where going through capabilities and being clear about what you're trying to accomplish, and buying with that in mind is so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's the fourth. So it's managing those processes. So what's your effing fifth challenge then?
The fifth effing challenge, regulatory compliance. So, that wording, that picture, that offering doesn't comply with the local laws. I mean, this kind of relates back to the multi challenge, is that when things start to get complex and all of a sudden you're pushing something that does not meet, the whether it's the local regulations, or you've moved it from one industry to another and you haven't thought about what are the constraints. So if you're marketing in highly regulated industries like healthcare, insurance, banking, then this could be the number one problem or the number one challenge for which you actually want to invest in a content or digital asset management system. So you're trying to be able to enforce standard content that has met legal and other reviews. You're trying to require that stakeholders are in the review process. So if you're trying to do a derivation of something, you don't want to make sure you've overstepped your bounds. So somebody else has got to, maybe for certain assets, there's an additional person in the review process, and you may have to have access but embargo the use of dated assets. So it's it's important that your whatever's managing these assets has got to have enough constraints on it to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And I think
particularly the more you give access to agencies, local marketers, sales, whatever, it becomes more important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've got many examples of this sort of thing from my career. I mean, there was one time I was working with a massive, I don't know what sort of company you describe them as, but they're massive, and they do chemicals, DIY gear, all sorts of things, and they were describing the non-stick nature of one of their products as like Teflon. And unfortunately, Teflon is obviously it's a trademarked product owned by one of the other big petrochemical companies, right? And they were constantly being sued by this company every time somebody dropped it into their copy. So they actually genuinely had a room of lawyers that were, it wasn't just the Teflon issue they were solving. There was like references to dead celebrities and all sorts of things that they were trying to solve across them. Well, it's a massive company, so they had a massive web estate that they were covering, but it was a group of lawyers basically playing whack-a-mole post-publish to find all of these issues. Whereas, as you say, if you had a CMS and we were there to help them choose and implement a CMS to solve this very problem, that in itself, just that one problem, is sufficient return on investment to actually fund the project, right? So it was amazing.
And that's kind of a good thing to, I mean, as we wrap up our 5 things, is that all of these are things that you can measure and understand what either the efficiency gain, the reduced work hours, the less risk. You know, if you've been sued, you know, it's very easy to say, okay, we've been sued 5 times and it costs this amount of money. If we spend, you know, a fraction of that, we can actually avoid being sued again.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, doing, I mean, this, and I think, you know, again, kind of mentioned this before, is that these systems do tend to be expensive to compare to other marketing tools, but they can return that investment manyfold. And one client I work with actually, you know, surveyed the entire marketing staff and say, how much time do you spend, you know, actually looking for assets? And then they said, if we can cut that in, you know, a quarter or a fifth, which you know most vendors would support that you could do that, then you know we've already saved, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours in whatever that rolled up cost is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've just remembered, I think Teflon is owned by DuPont maybe. Anyway.
DuPont or Dow.
Yeah, one of the big ones.
One of those guys.
Well, it's one of the big guys you don't want suing you every week, right? So anyway.
Because they have lots of lawyers.
So the 5 effing challenges for content management are internal accessibility, can't find stuff. The multi challenge, improving customer experience, personalization, the inefficient internal processes and making those better, and regulatory compliance, which might sound dull, but could actually fund your project. So that's the top 5. And so if we finish our agenda with a song, what would that song be this week, Jeff?
That song, and it's something that's kind of been pounding in my head since I saw the recent release of the movie Stop Making Sense. It's the song Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads. I think the original came out in 1980. And it's, you know, the thing that kept coming back to me is, you know, you may ask yourself, where's that large automobile? Where's that picture of the Ford that I need to put in the ad? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house because that's the wrong picture. It just makes me think of asset management challenges.
I personally think you've just shoehorned a song in that you like into this this premise, but I'm not going to argue with you. It's an absolute classic. So we'll play out with Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads from 1980. Thank you very much, Jeff, and will I see you in the studio next week?
Yes.
All right, I look forward to it. I'll see you then. Cheers, buddy.
Bye.
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, and you may find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again.
Splendid. And again, I allowed Jeff to slide in a classic tune there on the flimsiest of justifications, and that was Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads from 1980. If you enjoyed that conversation, if you're looking for some advice on any of the topics we discussed here, or you'd like to suggest a topic for the podcast, give Jeff a shout. You can contact him through our website, rockstarcmo.com. Right, it's that time of the week to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome back to the bar. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it?
It has. You were frightfully busy last week, and so we weren't able
well,
to get
indeed, it was one of those things that was unavoidable, and the bar happened to be closed. So, as I understand it, you sallied forth without me, and which is look, it is all about me. So I'm sure the show was woefully under staffed.
The delightful thing is we've been doing this for so long, so many weeks. I was actually able to get something from the archive that was just spot on with the topic I was discussing with Jeff. So I'm hoping the listeners enjoyed a little bit of a rerun.
Well, maybe we should just replace me with an AI chatbot, and you've got enough material now for a learning model. So you just.
Well, you referred to that today in your This Old Marketing podcast, and I think we could probably get away with that. So all I need to do is teach a chatbot how to just laugh along to everything you say, and then make gin, and then make drinking.
No, the other way around. I'm the chatbot. You're the one who has to show up to work.
No, we do it both ways, and just let the two of them chunter away and just create content like that. I think, especially
you can. I mean, I think there is a podcast now that has two chatbots literally talking with each other, and it's the show. I have not listened to it, but I have heard about this.
No, I think the colourfulness of our language and the imprecise nature of our observations would suggest that we're not robots, right? So I don't think anybody's thinking, no, really, I think those two guys could be robots. I'm hoping the listener isn't thinking that.
The imprecise nature of our observations. That should be the name of a new book. That's the name of your new book. The imprecise nature of my observations.
Maybe that's what I should change my Tuesday 2 Cents blog to, just imprecise observations.
Imprecise observations. That's good. That's a good name for a blog, actually.
It is. And a podcast. Oh man, you're going to say
a podcast.
This
imprecise
is our pivot.
Observations.
To quote your esteemed colleague and friend Joe Polizzi, this could be our pivot. We're going to Rockstar CMO ends today. Next week, imprecise observations.
There you go. There you go. Well, speaking of imprecise observations,
yes,
we do have a good cocktail
Splendid.
for this. Yes, for this evening.
Yes,
to sort of celebrate coming back. Yes. Here's the thing. I had a hankering as I was off and traveling and doing the things that I had to do for a classic gin fizz cocktail. And so that's what we're going to have tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to have a gin fizz and a classic gin fizz at that. And so if you don't know the gin fizz, of course, it's basically gin is obviously the foundation of it, but then you add that sort of frothy egg white topping, and it really adds a lovely texture to it. There is a secret in making it that I will share that I have discovered anyway, which is, okay, so first of all, you need gin, right? And whatever your favorite gin is. And by the way, the better the gin, the better for a gin fizz, in my opinion. And so then you add lemon, of course. Yeah. You need something for a sweetener, and as frequent listeners will remember, I hate the simple syrup idea. So maple syrup or some sort of syrup that gives you a sweetness, and then egg white and soda water, of course. Now that's the ingredients. Now here's the key.
Yes.
When you make it, you do 2 shakes, right? So you put all the ingredients into your shaker, and then shake it without ice first. Because they call that a dry shake, right? So you shake all the ingredients and because what that does is start to foam up the egg white and really get that going. And then you do basically the ice to cool everything down, pour it in, and then when you add the soda water to that little concoction that you've now poured into your glass, you get that wonderful, science lab sort of frothiness from the egg white that sort of creates the wonderful foam topping, and it's a little bit like magic. It's totally impressive for your friends that don't know what the hell's going on, and And there you have it. Then you have a lovely gin fizz cocktail.
Lovely. Well, I was, as we were contemplating before the show started, thinking of retiring our I'll make that with only the ingredients of my desktop bar joke. But seeing as you've brought gin to the table, and I have gin on my table, and the fact that it's quite nice to sit and drink a gin and tonic while I talk to you anyway, I shall attempt to make that very same drink using only the ingredients on my desktop bar. So we'll start off with some Hendrick's gin. Is that good enough for you for a gin fizz?
That's good enough. Yes, it's good enough. It would be better if they sponsored the show, but it's good enough for now.
Good Lord, man. Yes, one day. And I will also be the nice thing about the folks at Fever Tree, they have put together the English equivalent of egg white, maple syrup, and lemon, which of course everybody knows is the cucumber, and they've put that into some delicious tonic water, which is just like soda water.
Nice. But it's just like soda water, except it's just not. So.
Well, there's some fizz, there's some gin, and there's some fizz.
There are bubbles. Yes, there both do have bubbles.
This might be the closest I've been.
I for a long time didn't know the difference between soda water and tonic water and sparkling water, right? So it's but there is a real difference.
And the nice thing is, you've gone on a long journey of discovery when it comes to cocktails, and that's how you now know those things, right?
Well, or people educated me, one of the two.
Educated. Well, that's delicious, Robert. I could drink one of these every week, and so we have not killed the gin and tonic joke.
Gin fizzes for me are the kind of thing that you have to have like special. It feels like it's a special drink.
All right, so where are we going to have these special drinks this week?
Oh, I think we should probably have them somewhere cosmopolitan, right? So I'm thinking we should probably be in, it is fall in New York, and the temperatures are lovely, although it's been weirdly hot there. But somewhere I think in New York City at some fancy bar, where we can have a gin fizz cocktail and, our paleness and Europeanness, sort of emerges, basically, wearing our khakis, that kind of thing.
Well, that sounds classy.
Celebrating our unhipness, basically.
Yes. Well, I mean, our credit cards are good in those places as much as anybody else.
Oh, indeed. Oh, no. The credit cards are really good in those places. Yeah, they like suckers like you and me. Yeah.
All right. So that sounds fabulous. And so we're having these classy drinks in this classy space and looking all out of touch and out of place. Where conversation turns to marketing just to prove how hip we are. What is it we're discussing this week, Robert?
Well, it's about stealing ideas, and it's a topic that's come up of late, especially with AI and where a lot of experimentation is going now with content creation and marketing. And so often, I mean, we've spent our lives, right, as marketers trying to differentiate our brand or our product using content, right? And everybody wants their products to sound like no one else's, and we all want to establish like this distinctiveness that our product is considered the outlier, right? In the best way, the outlier in the marketplace, and we want to answer customers' needs with our content, with our thought leadership, and all those kinds of things, so that we create this differentiated, distinct, disproportionate share of our conversation about all, hashtag all of the things. And the thing is, though, we just don't. We just, that is a folly at best to try and do that, because in so many ways we have to say the same things that our competitors are saying because it's the right answer, or it's or it is the best way to talk about things. So we have to, in many ways, find the different way of saying the same thing that our competitors are saying, or that the market is saying, or that the consensus believes. And so I mean, Mark Twain once said, like, there's no such thing as a new idea. It's impossible. All we can do is take old ideas and put them into kind of a kaleidoscope and twist them into something that resembles uniqueness. And so, especially today, when we're in this sort of AI-driven copycat culture, even if you can come up with something differentiating, how long is it before the AI, basically says the same thing you're saying for someone else?
Yeah.
And so, the question then becomes, well, is uniqueness a prerequisite to success? And my answer to that is no, and it never has been. We can actually make great hay with ideas, and especially ideas that didn't work for our competitors or colleagues in the same space. And to illustrate that, I sort of lean on this idea that was that came out of research about 10 years ago, where they looked at how kids played. And they compared it to how businesses in the same industry competed. And basically what they discovered was more successful companies in a new industry, they didn't worry much about being different, but instead what they focused on was borrowing the best ideas from others in their space. In other words, they were the second mover, right, in the space, using similar ideas as those that came before them, but doing it in a better way, right? And so it's a form of what these researchers, when they looked at the kids, called parallel play, right? Where when young kids play together, they sit near each other, but they often play very much by themselves. But they pay attention. They actually look at what other kids around them are doing, and they, in many ways, will copy what they're doing. And so when the researchers were looking at this, they found that businesses that targeted new markets, they kind of echoed this kind of play. They didn't consider the developments from these new competitors as something to avoid or differentiate against. They basically watched and borrowed the best of what they saw. And I think that's such an important lesson for us as content marketers these days, especially with how noisy markets are, is that, we all want to create these original stories and express them in different narratives and do all these kinds of things. But if you can look at others in the proverbial sandbox and learn from their success and their failures, well, you can really be successful. And I'll give you a quick example of this because I actually saw it in action, where we worked with this big professional services firm, consulting firm. And they're the kind that basically help, big companies, big, with big technology projects, right? Implementing big technology projects. And they were trying to move into the marketing stack tech space. And they had no business being in there because they had no experience in it, but they needed to message themselves and they needed to sort of enter that new market for themselves. And they're faced with creating a story, right? They need to create a story. So what they did was they looked at all of their competitors and saw how they were positioning themselves, and basically looking at some of the stories that weren't working as well for their competitors, but they found that they could basically create an idea around, something like, when I say it, business leaders need better insight into changing customer needs and the ability to pivot quickly into new marketing approaches, right? That was going to be a core story for them. Well, then you go, well, how many times have you seen that, right? I mean, in the last, 10 years. But because of their provenance in other areas, cybersecurity, financial technology, other areas, that story had a bit of a unique wrapper to it, and it worked for them. Because what they were really good at was insights. They were really good at developing insights in other industries. So they could lean on their provenance of being super skilled and deep from a technology insights perspective and apply that to an old content wrapper that every other digital agency out there had tried to provide, but they made it work. So it was this idea of borrowing this old idea, this old story, and making it, theirs. And it's very much like, when you look at Star Wars, how much of that is borrowed from Kurosawa, and, when you look at Ridley Scott's Alien, how much it borrowed from the 1950s movie It. There's so many examples of this in Hollywood that, interestingly, borrowing those stories and making them your own can actually work when previous versions either didn't or were moderate successes.
No, I really like this idea, because we are obsessed with differentiation, especially in B2B. We don't do it, but we're obsessed with it.
Right. We get so obsessed that we forget that we can actually borrow some ideas.
I'd be responding by saying, oh, but, I worked for a vendor, and they would, the typical refrain was, well, what would Adobe do if to every fucking idea that ever came along? And you end up, looking at the tail lights of your main competitor rather than actually focusing on being different and being yourself. But I like what you're saying here, is that if you sort of borrow a bit of an idea and you have your own credibility spun on top of that, it doesn't have to be completely different. So that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, or it is different because you're the one telling it, right?
Put your own,
that's the real key. It's like that's the metaphor of the sort of George Lucas borrowing the idea of, the Hidden Fortress, right, from Kurosawa, and basically telling the exact same story, but doing it as a space opera. You know what I mean, with Wookiees and stormtroopers. But it's the same idea, and really making it one of the most popular stories of all time.
The other thing, of course, I think, which you allude to as well, is, and I kind of wrote about this on my blog, is that you don't need to be original to your audience, because you're the one they trust with this message, right? So it might be that it's similar to somebody else.
That's right.
What unique to you is that trust with that audience, and so they'll hear that same message from a competitor, but when they hear it from you, they trust it. So I think that's also something with the professional services company, right?
Yep, that's a great point. Yep.
That's awesome.
That's a great point.
So where are people going to find things that are completely differentiated and completely original, but maybe borrowed from other places, but definitely unique to their audience?
Well, all my ideas are stolen. I mean, let's just be incredibly clear about this. All my ideas are completely stolen. However, and maybe most prominently in my new book, which is Content Marketing Strategy, just out 2 weeks ago now, and selling through your favorite bookstore. I have been told, and for many of your listeners, just as a secret little, I don't know how secret it is, but it's, if you buy the book at koganpage.com, you can actually get a package of the ebook plus the paperback book together for a single price, which is better than you can get on Amazon. So if you're interested in such things, you can do that. And by the way, it's, even though it's Kogan Page is based in the UK, from what I understand, the shipping is lickety split here in the States as well. So
nice. That's nice. Well, I got mine from Amazon, and I didn't get all the nice things. But what I did get was that I got it early, which gave me the opportunity to interview about the book in episode, which is 2 episodes ago. So I'll include a link to that in the show notes in case a listener didn't hear that special episode 2, because that was absolute delight. Thank you.
Lovely.
And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They'll find me in my little hovel at contentadvisory.net, which is newly refreshed with new content and fun things like that. And then, of course, on LinkedIn. I have given up on X. X no longer marks the spot. So
I like that. X no longer marks the spot. That's cool. All right, mate. And most important to me, will you be in the bar next week?
Apparently, that's the plan.
Barring
Yes.
client work and all the other things that get in our way. I look forward to it, my friend. I'll see you then.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. A very good point. There are no new ideas. We just put our differentiation on those that we borrow that already exist. So, that's a wrap on episode 187 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Quite a short one this week. And I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Jeff and Robert for sharing their insights, and to you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. You can find all of our links and the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. And please, let us know what you think via the socials. Drop us a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, I think Jeff and I will be digging into budgeting, as it's that time of the year and I need some advice. And Robert will be back in the bar sharing his content marketing advice. But until then, have a great week I hope you again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.